My journey didn't begin as I had hoped. On Thursday and Friday, I was supposed to go to a conference in Minneapolis, but it wasn't the usual warm send-off I was used to. My wife Martha usually took half a day off to make my departure memorable, but this time she just gave me a quick goodbye kiss. Before going to work, let me introduce myself. I'm Ava, but people often call me Evan. I'm 49 years old, happily married to Marta for 24 years, and we have 2 kids, Ross, who's 22, and Amelia, who recently turned 20. My journey started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I left work and headed to the airport. I always like to arrive early for my 6 p.m. flight, to avoid any stress about being late. Everything was going smoothly, and I waited patiently for the announcement of the flight's departure. However, luck was not on my side this time. The flight from Minnesota was delayed due to bad weather and an impending snowstorm. After a 45-minute delay, we finally boarded the plane. About 30 minutes into the flight, I noticed the plane making a subtle leftward turn. At first I thought it was a minor adjustment, but it became clear that we were turning around. The pilot confirmed that due to the severe snowstorm, we couldn't land in Minneapolis, so we had to return to where we started. Back on solid ground, I hurried to the airline's check-in desk to rearrange my plans for the next morning. Fortunately, I managed to get one of the last available seats on the next flight. Despite missing the conference, I was determined to attend. As I sat down, a glimmer of hope emerged, but I couldn't get to the conference. Immediately, I called my contact in Minneapolis to let them know about the delay and left a detailed message on my boss's voicemail. Anxiously, I called home, hoping to hear Martha's comforting voice. To my shock, she didn't answer and the house was dark. With her car gone from the driveway, I left my luggage in the car and cautiously entered the house. I heard voices coming from the living room, which surprised me. It turned out the TV had been left on, and that led me to a troubling conclusion. Martha had apparently come home after work, and I clearly remembered turning off the TV. Before leaving, I silenced the TV and searched for any sign of her, but found none. Anxiously, I called her mobile phone. Finally, she warmly inquired about my whereabouts, a question that had become a familiar part of our marriage, now tinged with genuine concern and interest. In response, she mentioned that she was at home watching TV shows. As she spoke, the weariness of my long journey began to wash over me. In that moment, my sole desire was to be with my wife, seeking solace in her presence and sharing closeness moments, even if only for a few precious hours. Despite the flight delay, I held on to the hope of unexpected, joyful hours in the comfort of our own bed. However, within just 30 seconds, the contentment of returning home was replaced by a profound sense of uncertainty. Instead of anticipating the warm embrace of my devoted wife, with whom I had shared 24 years of love and trust, I was confronted with the shocking revelation of lies and deception. It was an unexpected blow that left me speechless, and unsure I couldn't help but question whether she had truly cheated on me, and why she would do such a thing. There appeared to be no logical explanation for her deceit, whether it occurred while she was at work, with friends, or at a restaurant. I must have remained silent for a while, as Martha's worried voice eventually broke through, asking if I was still present. I snapped back to reality and mumbled in response, "Yes, sorry. We've landed in O'Hare and I have to go." With a heavy heart, I abruptly ended the call. The phone rang again, but this time I turned it off, needing some solitude to make sense of my racing thoughts. Sitting on the couch, surrounded by silence and emptiness, I felt numbness wash over me. The question haunted me: why did Marta deceive me? Maybe there was a reasonable explanation for the lie. Perhaps she was planning a surprise. Thinking back, I recalled how I had organized a series of deceptions. 4 years ago, for our 20th wedding anniversary, I had secretly arranged a 2-week cruise and involved her boss and parents in the plan, creating a web of deception. The memories of that lie came rushing back. In the midst of my confusion, one persistent thought crept in, which I vehemently rejected. It was a thought I refused to accept. Not us, we wouldn't be in this situation. It was simply inconceivable. And that, I thought to myself, was it. Realizing that my daughter, Amelia, might know about all of Marta's surprises and plans, I quickly dialed her number from memory. My beloved daughter's voice greeted me on the phone and asked how I was. I inquired with genuine curiosity about her well-being, and she replied saying she had just finished her homework and was watching TV. Feeling the importance of the situation, I cautiously asked if she had talked to her mom recently, and if Marta had mentioned anything to her. Amelia mentioned that they had their usual weekly phone call on Sunday, giving me a glimmer of hope. I then asked her if she happened to know anything about a surprise Marta was preparing. I made it clear that I didn't want to know the nature of the surprise, only if Marta was planning something. My voice held anticipation as I waited for her response. Amelia's reply shattered my hopes. She mentioned that she didn't know anything, and inquired about what was going on. Unaware of my worry, coming up with a feeble explanation, I told her that Marta had been acting a bit strange lately, and I wondered if she was hiding a nice surprise, perhaps for my 50th birthday. Amelia quickly dismissed the idea, reminding me that we had celebrated my birthday last month. Having failed to get any information, I accepted the truth and wished my daughter a good night. She replied, sounding dejected. I realized that the surprise I'd hoped for wasn't going to happen. The question remained: why would Marta deceive me? Possible explanations started to form in my mind. Perhaps it's related to an upcoming promotion. That's likely the case, I concluded. Even though I couldn't understand why she would lie, I considered the possibility that she was still working hard to achieve that elusive promotion. Lately, she had to stay late at work several times due to her unwavering dedication. However, deep down, Martha knew that no promotion could outweigh the value of the time we lost together. She understood that I wanted her to reduce her work hours, so we could spend more time together. A reasonable request that she understood. Ironically, I recalled an important decision I made. A few months before our 20th anniversary, turning down a promotion. It had been nearly 5 years since I had enthusiastically accepted a job offer to become the vice president of finance at my company. But this role required frequent travel to the company's headquarters in Chicago for board meetings and visits to various factories across the country. Initially, I was excited about the job offer, but Martha quickly raised doubts, making me reconsider my decision. The cautionary tale of a colleague who went through a divorce just 2 years after accepting a similar position couldn't be ignored. While financial success was a reward for him, it came at the cost of loneliness and suffering. Given the circumstances, and the fact that our children still needed guidance and support through their remaining years of school, Marta understandably didn't want to take on this responsibility alone. Throughout the week we had in-depth discussions about the potential consequences of accepting the promotion. Gradually it became clear that I was on the verge of losing sight of what truly mattered in my life. My wife and children regaining clarity, I made a heartfelt decision to decline the promotion, recognizing that my commitment to my family took precedence over material success. The past few months had been challenging. As Marta pushed hard for her promotion, it brought back the doubts I had about my own career growth since our children were now in college. Our family consisted of just the two of us, while Martha thought her promotion was attainable, with minimal impact on our lives, such as more business trips. I worried about the many hours of overtime I would need to put in. Seeing my wife for only an hour or two a day during the week left me dissatisfied. Brief moments together didn't bring contentment, and the lack of quality time together weighed on my heart. The decline in our closeness life couldn't go unnoticed. Martha became increasingly engrossed in her work, spending Saturdays and even Sundays at the office. When she returned home, fatigue consumed her, leaving no energy for anything else. It had been a while, if not impossible, to remember the last time we were closeness. 3 weeks ago last month. Specific details blurred into a depressing haze. Acknowledging that age contributed to our diminishing physical connection, it was hard to ignore the sad lack of bed life we used to share. It's possible that her deception during our phone call was an attempt to avoid discussing my concerns and hide behind her work commitments. However, it's only fair to admit that I too was on a business trip and had to work overtime. Occasionally at the same time, there was a simple way to uncover the truth. I decided to call Martha's direct line at the T-Bold advertising agency to confirm things. To my surprise, her colleague, Jake Turnbull, answered the phone. Alarmed, I quickly composed myself, expecting to hear Martha's voice. I greeted him using my nickname, and his response caught me off guard. As he mentioned that I should be enjoying a vacation with Martha, I was shocked and confused by his comment, and it was clear that something was amiss. That evening I found myself in a web of surprises, and inquired about the supposed vacation afterward. I quickly regained my composure, apologized to Jake for the interruption, and fabricated an excuse, claiming that I had dialed his number by mistake. He reassured me without any concern, mentioning that Martha owed him lunch for covering her shift and the late working hours. He expressed his frustration, saying that it was 9 in the evening, and he was still at work with that. He concluded the conversation and hung up. Gradually the truth became clear to me. Martha wasn't working and was in fact absent from her workplace. According to Jake, she had taken a vacation until the end of the week. Panic slowly crept into my mind, tightening its grip as fear took hold. Where was Martha? What could she be doing? An unwelcome but silent thought invaded my mind. No, it couldn't be true. I've always strived to see the best in people, maintaining a positive outlook, and valuing the inherent kindness in everyone. But now, against my will, I started contemplating the worst-case scenario. Could this really be happening? Could Martha betray me like this? The thought of her being with her sister, Victoria, crossed my mind involuntarily. Over time, we distanced ourselves from Victoria and her ex-husband, Mike. Once we were incredibly close, bound by strong friendships that felt unbreakable. As our lives intertwined in a beautiful tapestry of shared experiences, we spent evenings together, supported each other, cared for our children, organized numerous family gatherings, and even went on vacations together. But everything changed one fateful day, when I returned home with a throbbing headache. In search of relief, I took a couple of Tylenol tablets and lay down on the couch. Half an hour later, Marta and Victoria returned from a shopping trip, chatting animatedly unnoticed by them. I remained on the couch. Suddenly, Victoria began to speak, asking if Martha had noticed the new product manager at the grocery store. My heart raced as I anxiously awaited Martha's response. She calmly replied that she found him cute, admitting that he had smiled at me. Then with unease she added that it would be better if he were smiling after yesterday's encounter in the back seat of her car, declared defiantly by Victoria. To my surprise, my wife responded disapprovingly, cautioning Victoria that she might get caught, risking the loss of a good husband. And more unfazed Victoria responded confidently, assuring Martha that she was always careful. With those words they abruptly left, leaving me in a state of uncertainty. As someone who values honesty and integrity, I struggled to bear the weight of this revelation. Uncertain of the right course of action, I found myself at a crossroads. One thing was clear: Mike deserved to know the truth. Hearing about Victoria's infidelity would undoubtedly devastate him, and the thought weighed heavily on my heart. I knew that Mike, upon learning of her betrayal, would not hesitate to kick Victoria out of their home. I carried the burden of potentially causing the collapse of their marriage. Did I really want to be the reason for such a profound change? Before I could reach a final decision, my wife returned home with our children, comforted by the fact that she disapproved of her sister's actions. I decided to postpone my decision until we could discuss it further. That evening, as we prepared for bed, I broached the subject seeking her guidance. I cautiously began explaining the situation and sharing the news of discovering infidelity in our circle. Her expression initially revealed uncertainty, as I asked in all seriousness what I should do, and whether confronting the cheater with anger was an appropriate response. Martha took a moment carefully, considering the circumstances surrounding the situation. She began slowly suggesting that it might depend on the specific situation, and that there were various factors to consider. Seeking further clarity, I presented hypothetical scenarios for discussion, inquiring about our friend Mike, and whether we should turn a blind eye if he had cheated before and picked up a woman at a bar. I wanted to know her viewpoint. The weight of the situation hung in the air as I contemplated potential courses of action. Suddenly Martha sat up in bed, gripping the phone tightly and expressing her anger. It was clear she felt compelled to take immediate action and inform Victoria about the betrayal. Instinctively, I gently took her phone and told Martha that I would handle the situation as it was my responsibility. Martha had doubts about the correctness of our decision and asked what was going on. I responded confidently, assuring her that I was sure and hoped that Victoria would kick the cheater out of the house. Martha looked at me with determination in her eyes, affirming that we wouldn't let him stay with us. She declared firmly that he could find his own place, and that she wouldn't shelter a cheater in our home. Luckily, things played in my favor and Mike answered the phone. I began with a heavy sigh, addressing him as his favorite son-in-law. Mike responded with a touch of humor, acknowledging that I was his only son-in-law, making me automatically his favorite. He asked what was so important that I was calling so late. After taking a deep breath, I cautiously continued, warning him that I had overheard a conversation and had devastating news to share. I told him that his spouse hadn't been faithful and had cheated on him just yesterday. There was a long pause on the phone as Mike absorbed this shocking revelation. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Filled with disbelief, he expressed his doubt, asking if I was absolutely certain it was about his Victoria. I confirmed that I'd heard it directly from her own mouth, describing it as more of a boast, without a hint of remorse. Expressing my condolences, I offered my support and told him that we were there for him and the kids. Mike reassured me and hung up the phone. Martha looked at me with sadness in her eyes. Tears welling up, she whispered that she was proud of me and asked for a hug. Feeling lost and scared, embracing her, I offered comfort in the face of uncertainty. After a moment of calming down, I inquired about whether they should consider seeing a therapist. Curious about their potential next steps, Martha, feeling weary, mumbled sleepily, expressing doubt about whether therapy would change anything, and mentioning that once someone has strayed, they tend to do it again. I quietly agreed with her assessment. The ringing of the phone roused me from sleep, and I answered groggily, trying not to disturb Martha. Victoria's furious voice lashed out at me, demanding answers about what I had told Mike. I responded calmly to Victoria, stating that I had told Mike the truth, and emphasized the importance of honesty. As Martha watched with concern and resolve, Victoria's voice was filled with anger, as she expressed disbelief that her sister would betray her. I firmly replied that sometimes the truth comes out unexpectedly, and we both agreed that cheaters should face the consequences. Victoria's tears began to flow uncontrollably, and she confessed that Mike had kicked her out of the house. I reiterated that it was a deserved consequence. Victoria pleaded desperately, asking what she should do and if she could come to us. Regretfully, I replied that we couldn't provide refuge to a cheater, and she would have to navigate the situation on her own. Victoria seemed shocked by my response, and I turned to Martha for guidance, asking her what to say to a cheater who wanted to come to us. Martha leaned towards the phone and firmly declared that she didn't want a cheater in her house, and told him to get lost. I then conveyed a message on behalf of both of us, stating that Victoria was no longer a part of our lives, and that she should stay away from us. We didn't want her to come or call. Martha snuggled closer to me, and we sought comfort in each other's arms. She whispered that she was proud of how I had handled the situation, and we peacefully drifted off to sleep. However, the morning brought an expected storm, as Martha's father called and yelled at his daughter. Martha was anxious and tearful. After the phone call, I explained to Martha that it was our mutual decision, and we had discussed the possibility of seeking advice and ending our connection with the deceiver. I clarified that I had only mentioned a hypothetical scenario about Mike and hadn't asserted that he actually cheated on Victoria. I posed a thought-provoking question, asking how Mike's potential betrayal differed from Victoria's infidelity. Martha defended her sister, stating that Victoria was family. I expressed disappointment and questioned if it was acceptable to cheat on someone because they were family, leading Martha to be momentarily speechless. 3 years ago, I had a pivotal conversation with Martha, asserting my stance about her sister. I made it clear that I didn't want her sister near our children or in our home. Although Martha occasionally met her sister secretly, it remained an unspoken taboo in our household, and she visited Victoria covertly while I was away. Over time, Mike managed to overcome the situation and prepare for remarriage, and my resentment toward Victoria waned. I had stopped caring about her presence and found joy in her absence. Shifting my focus to Martha, I gently broached the subject, feeling the need to resolve the issue. I suspected that Martha might carry guilt for deceiving me, although I had reached a point where I no longer cared. A surprising turn of events unfolded. as I found myself on a stage, in front of a vast audience at the Congress. I began my speech addressing the crowd, and discussing two distinct types of individuals, in the realm of tissue use deniers, and those who confront reality. During the talk, Dave Millicent, Martha's boss, waved his hand wildly and confessed to evading my wife. Jake Turnbull, seated behind Dave, also admitted to evading my wife. Another man joined in with a cheeky comment, creating a moment of shared amusement and light laughter among the audience. Suddenly I sat up on the couch, wiping drool from my face, and realized it was already midnight. I must have slept for over an hour, and I wondered if Martha had returned home during my nap, possibly unaware of my presence as an unexpected guest. Hastening toward the bedroom, I entered but found no signs of her. Then, it dawned on me that she was likely with her sister, Victoria. Contemplating whether to contact Victoria and inquire about Martha's whereabouts, I hesitated, realizing that obtaining Victoria's address would entail acting behind Martha's back. Recalling that I needed to pick up Victoria's children from a specific location, I wondered if I still had Victoria's phone number. As I prepared to search my contact list, I noticed the Find My Phone app icon on my smartphone. A year ago I had installed it on both our phones, after losing mine during a trip from New York to Cincinnati. Recognizing its capabilities, I promptly opened the application. Within seconds, I received information about Martha's phone's location. It indicated Mills Lake. I was puzzled, wondering why she would be there temporarily. Victoria was facing financial difficulties, making it unlikely for her to afford a cottage on Mills Lake. The situation was becoming increasingly mysterious. Mills Lake was renowned as an upscale residential area, with cottage costs far exceeding those of our modest home. Using Google Earth, I carefully pinpointed Martha's precise location. To my surprise, she was inside an exclusive estate, surrounded by an imposing stone wall. This revelation left me baffled. What could Martha be doing in such a luxurious, millionaire's estate? The distance between Mills Lake and our town was an hour's drive, but my determination to uncover the truth propelled me forward. At the same time, I realized that a direct conversation with her would likely result in dishonesty or evasion. Gathering indisputable evidence was essential before initiating a conversation. Despite my hesitations flooded with intense emotions, I quickly headed to Mills Lake, reproaching myself for refusing to consider the possibility of Martha's wrongdoing. Regret gnawed at me as I realized I should have checked her phone's GPS locator right from the start, instead of seeking excuses for her actions. Uncertainty clouded my thoughts as I arrived at Mills Lake, uncertain of my intentions and harboring a faint hope for a straightforward explanation. Anxious, I made my way to the estate where Martha was located. Weighed down by the anticipation of what awaited, before me loomed a massive gate, barring direct access to the estate. I wasn't planning to drive up to the house and announce my presence in search of my wife. After assessing the situation, I understood that parking by the road might attract unwelcome attention, possibly leading to the arrival of security guards or law enforcement in this exclusive community. Driving a bit further, I stumbled upon a humble path and decided to park the car there. Stepping out, I grappled with uncertainty. How would I bypass the towering wall separating me from the truth? Then it dawned on me that the estate bordered the lake, meaning an approach from this side was possible. With renewed determination, I made my way to the lakeshore, my heart racing at the prospect of finding an entry point to the estate from this direction. Discovering a footpath leading to the lake, I cautiously moved toward the shoreline, not knowing which grand cottage Martha was in. I counted on another check of the GPS locator. In the end, I reached a luxurious mansion, where several second-floor windows still had lights on. However, the ground floor was dimly lit. Only one curtain remained ajar, casting warm light outside. Seeking an elevated vantage point, I found a sturdy tree and climbed high enough to peer inside. My gaze settled on a man wearing a white, terry cloth robe. Though he was hardly recognizable to me, the man, appearing older than me, swiftly vanished from view. A moment later, a woman emerged, confirming my suspicions. It was Victoria, as she stood in an open robe, sipping champagne from a glass. I couldn't deny that she remained attractive at her age. The pieces began to fall into place, and I realized that Martha was indeed with her sister. This revelation didn't surprise me, given the financial implications of a divorce. It seemed likely that Victoria was seeking a wealthy partner, yet I couldn't help but think that Martha had been drawn into a lifestyle I disapproved of and didn't want for her. As events unfolded before my eyes, I witnessed a scene that left me disheartened. The man I initially spotted approached Victoria, and his hands boldly explored her body. He took her champagne glass, discreetly setting it aside. I had to climb down from the tree and avert my eyes from this closeness display of my sister-in-law's allure. My sensibilities were rooted in traditional notions, where love and bed life formed the core of a genuine relationship between a man and a woman. What I observed felt devoid of love, lacking the connection and affection I held dear. Even if I didn't hold Victoria in high regard, I wouldn't wish such a destructive and empty existence on anyone. Feeling uneasy with the scene unfolding before me, I contemplated descending from the tree. However, as the couple moved away from the window, I locked eyes with Martha. She sat on a distant couch sporting a foolish, inebriated smile. My heart sank. Frozen in bewilderment, her robe was open, revealing a sight that sealed the fate of our marriage. Overwhelmed by shock, I took a hesitant step backward, but lost my footing and tumbled from the tree. Branches broke my fall, and I was fortunate to escape with minor injuries. In a daze, I got to my feet, feeling like an old man, under the weight of what I had witnessed. I started wandering aimlessly, like a zombie adrift in a desolate world. Tears welled up in my eyes as I limped my way back to the car, reflecting the profound pain that consumed me. It wasn't the physical fall from the tree that caused me pain, but the emotional loss of happiness and the separation from a loved one. During those distressing minutes, I briefly considered breaking into the cottage, forcing my way inside to confront the situation. However, the harsh reality of the consequences, potential years in prison for trespassing, and assault quickly extinguished this desire. Alone with my thoughts at night, a storm of emotions raged within me. Denial could no longer shield me from the harsh truth, and I grappled with the profound sadness and simmering anger. Yet I recognized the danger of letting that anger consume me, understanding that it would only further damage my own life. Deep down I knew that no matter how angry I was, I would never resort to physically harming Martha. As events unfolded, I considered various options. The simplest one would be to return home, pack my belongings and leave her. If we lived in a no-fault divorce state, had separate incomes and no dependent children, the divorce process would likely proceed smoothly. We would divide our property equally and part ways. However, despite this straightforward path, a part of me yearned for justice and the desire to exact some form of revenge. A bold idea took hold of my thoughts, and without hesitation, I decided to seize the moment and see how it played out. Clutching my phone tightly, I dialed Martha's number, anticipating that she might not answer, and I'd be directed to her voicemail. I hoped she'd check her voicemail right away, just in case. Yune. I began projecting my voice onto the answering machine. Recording, since you didn't pick up the home phone, I'm calling you on your mobile. I wanted to alert you not to be alarmed when you hear my keys in the door. In a few minutes, amid the chaos of a flight, delayed by a blizzard and uncertain arrival times, I left a message for Martha. It had been a chaotic evening, and I outlined the challenges we faced. Our flight had been diverted to Chicago, but we were finally on our way back home. They couldn't pinpoint our exact landing time, but I estimated I'd be home in about 30 minutes. Then I said goodbye and hung up, knowing Martha would receive a notification of a new voicemail. Curiosity and anxiety would undoubtedly eat at her. Late into the night, leaving a message at that time was unusual. Adding to the intrigue, I pictured her reaching for the phone, eagerly checking her voicemail, hoping for clarity amid the chaos. I silently prayed that Martha would be intoxicated enough not to notice that I couldn't use my mobile phone. During the flight, panic must have been growing inside her. She realized she might be ensnared in her own deceitful web. In a fit of rage, she was likely contemplating how to get ahead of me and rush home, hastily dressing and fielding questions from her sister and lover. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts, and I quickly answered, realizing that she might be trying to gauge my time of arrival. I began the conversation with a weary tone, apologizing for potentially waking her up. She replied, assuring me that it was okay, and informed me that she was on her way home, expecting to arrive in about an hour, give or take a few minutes. Martha acknowledged my response with a simple okay, and ended the call promptly. I soon saw her car exiting the estate's gates and speeding down the highway. My heart skipped a beat as I witnessed her reckless driving, nearly swerving into a ditch, and it became evident that she was much more intoxicated than I initially thought. Although I felt anger and frustration, I realized that her actions posed a threat, not only to herself, but also to innocent people on the road. Despite my lingering resentment, I couldn't bear the thought of her life being in jeopardy as the mother of my children. Determined to ensure her safety, I decided to follow her, ready to intervene if necessary. Thinking quickly, I dialed special services and informed the operator that I wanted to report a drunk driver. I described the car's erratic behavior, how it had almost collided with mine, and its reckless swerving. I also provided details about the car, mentioning that it had pulled onto the south side of the highway at Mills Lake and was a dark blue Ford Taurus. I had memorized the last 4 digits of the license plate and emphasized the urgency of stopping the car before its driver caused harm. The operator thanked me for my report and assured me that a patrol car was on its way to apprehend the intoxicated driver. Keeping a safe distance, I continued to tail Martha, navigating the traffic carefully. 2 exits later, I noticed a patrol car approaching her location. From a distance, I could see a patrol car parked on the bridge, facing the highway. As Martha's car came into view, the patrol car quickly accelerated, flashing its lights to signal her to pull over. I drove past them, feeling a mixture of relief and deep sadness. 45 minutes later, I arrived back home, the weight of the evening's events heavy on my shoulders. It seemed almost ironic but undeniably tragic. In a single night, the life of someone I deeply loved could have been reduced to a series of unfortunate consequences. A somber realization settled within me, making me consider that Martha's actions could have resulted in a fatal car accident, and the subsequent grief and suffering for my children. I paused to reflect, allowing my fears to surface, acknowledging the fragility and preciousness of life. My love for Martha was no longer a central factor in the decision I had made. It wasn't that I had stopped loving her, but I could no longer envision a shared future together. I took drastic measures by turning off the home phone and silencing my mobile phone. I needed some privacy to gather my thoughts. As I reflected on the hours spent searching for an explanation for Martha's deception, I realized that the most straightforward explanation had been right in front of me. All along, disappointed in myself, I opened a bottle of wine and contemplated the path forward. For many years, I believed that my love for Martha would mature like a fine wine and eventually reach its zenith. Now confronted with the reality of our strained relationship, I faced the challenging question of what to do next. As I continued to sip wine in the night unfolded, I searched for clarity in direction. Amidst the whirlwind of emotions that engulfed me, the love that it once bound us now felt like it had turned into bitter vinegar, leaving me in agonizing pain. The depth of her betrayal struck me to my core, but the pain was not solely from the betrayal itself. It was the realization that our love had withered away. This love had defined me for the past 26 years, 24 of which were spent as husband and wife. Without her I felt lost, like a soul adrift devoid of purpose and self-identity. Could I go on without this love? The pain intensified, making me contemplate putting an end to the suffering. Perhaps, by finding solace in the depths beneath a bridge I had never imagined. Living without Martha, starting life anew, felt like an insurmountable challenge. Filled with uncertainty, how do you plan your life when a person who has been your everything is suddenly gone? I was at a loss, unsure of where to begin. Making decisions without consulting Martha seemed inconceivable. Family had always been the focal point of my life. I carefully weighed every choice, considering the well-being and happiness of my wife and children. Even our social life revolved around our family's needs, and I rarely engaged with colleagues and others. While I attended obligatory work events, like the annual Christmas party, my priority had always been getting back home quickly. The times I ventured beyond these obligations were few. Over the past decade, I'd occasionally reminisce about the times when we socialized with colleagues. But now, with the kids gone, it was just Martha and me, and now I found myself alone. Engulfed in my sadness, I had no one to love, no one to lean on for the first time in my life. Loneliness became my unwelcome companion. Why did she choose this path? Why resort to cheating when a straightforward divorce would have been more painful, but perhaps more considerate? Of the years and joyful moments we shared, when did she stop loving me? Did she merely endure our relationship until our children grew up and moved away? When did her care and attention wane? As our children embarked on their own journeys, I saw it as an opportunity to invest more in Martha and our relationship. I didn't realize that she saw it as the end of our shared path. I watched as a stranger became a constant presence, suggesting they were comfortable with each other, or perhaps how easily deception had infiltrated our lives. Martha and her lover leaving me isolated and unloved made it evident that we were no longer a couple. In the midst of despair, my pain became a connection to life. It served as a painful reminder of what I had lost, of the best moments we had shared, and most importantly of the presence of our children. In that dark moment, my children became my saviors, casting a glimmer of hope upon me. My self-esteem had plummeted, to the point where I lacked the strength to lift myself out of the abyss of despair. My children came to my rescue. Just thinking about them provided a faint spark of self-preservation. Soon, Ross and Amelia would go on their independent journeys and start their own families. To shield myself from the impending wave of grief, I realized I needed to distance myself from all of it. It wasn't an easy task, but it was filled with pain. I understood that I'd always carry the memory of Martha, of how I loved her, but I'd also remember her with another man. I needed to extricate myself from this situation. Throughout my life, I had always been content with simple expectations. Even though my parents weren't wealthy, I had the fortune of growing up in a family where deep affection prevailed. The material possessions that now surrounded me seemed insignificant in comparison. As I contemplated everything I owned, I realized that clothes, a car, and a laptop were the only items worth taking with me. The more I thought about it, the clearer my path out of this predicament became. I made the decision to pack my belongings and disappear without a trace. I no longer wished to gaze upon the woman who had once been the center of my universe. Just seeing her would serve as a painful reminder of my loss and the constant ache within me. With renewed determination, I rose from my seat, ready to act decisively. I swiftly packed several bags, and it took me only 30 minutes to do so. Soon I was loading my things into the car. It was just shy of 6 in the morning when I completed the packing. Exhausted yet resolved, I decided to take a brief nap, confident that Martha would still be in detox. Until late in the morning, when I closed my eyes, thoughts filled my mind about starting afresh. My phone's alarm woke me at 9 a.m. Without delay, I scheduled an urgent meeting with a lawyer. Following that, I headed to the shower to symbolically wash away the remnants of the past. With a heavy heart, I removed my wedding ring and placed it solemnly on the table next to the phone. This final act marked the beginning of my journey toward a new chapter in my life, one where I sought personal liberation and happiness. I had made the painful decision to express my disappointment in a letter addressed to Martha. Although our conversation had reached a point where it seemed futile, I felt the need to express my emotions. Martha, it saddens me to acknowledge that I now see you following the path of reckless promiscuity and loneliness that often accompanies your sister. Perhaps it's an inherited trait, a sad legacy. By the time you read this, I will have completely removed myself from your life, ensuring that our paths never cross again. The extent of your betrayal has left me reeling in a pain I couldn't even fathom. The intensity of my pain is beyond measure. Nevertheless, I am grateful for the 24 years of happiness we once shared, and for the 2 wonderful children you gave me. Trying to be fair and honest, I will be brief in this farewell. May you quickly return to the arms of your beloved, leaving behind our broken family. I thirst for a justice you couldn't provide. Did your dissolute escapades bring you any satisfaction or revenge for your actions? The man you were with, judging by the grandeur of the mansion, was quite wealthy. I no longer have the desire to see or talk to you. We have nothing left to discuss. Our lawyers will handle all the necessary procedures, and I ask that you promptly sign the divorce papers. The reason for our separation is of no importance. By 10 in the morning, I was at the bank, I responsibly addressed our shared credit card debt and promptly closed the accounts. Taking immediate action, I visited the bank to obtain a cash receipt for our entire savings and securities. Additionally, I ensured that there were sufficient funds in the checking account to cover the mortgage and utility bills for the next 2 months. Taking a further step toward independence, I removed my name from the joint account. Upon leaving the bank, I held a substantial check amounting to approximately $250,000. Before noon, I arrived at work, surprising my boss, who expected me to be in Minnesota. When I shared the news of my immediate resignation and relocation, his surprise grew. Our relationship held a unique meaning that transcended the typical employer-employee dynamic. My boss had maintained his current position because I turned down a promotion, and initially he wasn't pleased and felt indebted to me. But 2 years ago, during his divorce, I explained that my decision to decline the promotion was due to his situation. Since then, our relationship had evolved from a traditional boss-employee arrangement into one of equal partnership. He began by stating that he understood my desire to resign and was willing to accept it. Instead of going through the HR department and writing a check for my 401k, he had an alternative proposal. He offered me an opportunity in their newly established optical division in taxi. Although the salary would be lower than my current position, there were reportedly affordable housing options there that would enable me to secure decent housing at an attractive price. We sealed our agreement with a handshake, and he agreed to spread the word that I had chosen to leave my job voluntarily. The next step was to meet with my lawyer and explain my decision to separate from Martha. I instructed him to serve her with the divorce papers and grant her the power of attorney to sell the house, which represented 50% of our total assets. Although my lawyer, who was also a close family friend, attempted to persuade me to consider alternative scenarios, he soon realized the significant changes awaiting me. By midnight, I would be in another city, in another state, and without a wife. In the afternoon, as profound fatigue overcame me, I sought a place to rest and stumbled upon a rather dated motel. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, using a disposable phone I had acquired for this purpose, I dialed Ross's number and explained that it was my new phone number. Ross inquired if I had heard from Mom, and I revealed that I had found out the day before that she had been unfaithful. He expressed his disappointment and concern, asking what I planned to do about it. I shared that I had taken care of everything. I had packed my things, cleared my bank accounts, resigned from my job, and was heading south, ending my relationship with her. I also mentioned that she would receive the divorce papers by the end of the week. Ross asked if Amelia knew, and I informed him that she didn't yet. I assured him that I would keep him informed and promised to call regularly. We exchanged expressions of love and care, and I reassured him that I loved him and would take care of myself. After concluding the conversation, I contacted Amelia. The conversation was filled with deep sadness. My children, with heavy hearts, learned the truth about their mother's actions and how they affected our family. Witnessing the destructive influence of Aunt Victoria on her family, my children, like me, tried to comprehend how their mother could inflict the same pain on us. I was certain that Victoria had influenced her sister to act in this manner. Amelia, always candid, broke the silence by asking how long it had been happening and how long we had ceased to be enough for her. I comforted her by explaining that the duration and reasons were no longer important. What mattered was that I had loved her deeply, trusted her with all my heart, and she betrayed that trust. I reassured Amelia not to worry and said that I would be okay. I mentioned that I was incredibly sad at the moment, but I believed I would heal over time, especially if I could maintain some distance from her mom. I also assured her that I would share my new address, and she could come to me once her school year was over. As I made this promise, tears welled up in my eyes, and I wanted Amelia to know that there would always be a place for her by my side in Tucson. The optics division was relatively small, with only 30 employees. The district manager, who bore a stronger resemblance to his father than a stern boss, fostered a sense of camaraderie and comfort within the team. I immediately felt like a welcomed guest, which provided some solace during a difficult time. A month later, I chose a lovely house in a condominium. Throughout this period, I maintained no contact with Marta, relying solely on updates from my lawyer and my children. Moving forward was not without its challenges. One situation proved particularly demanding. My lawyer informed me that Marta was ready to contest the divorce, expressing her unwillingness to proceed with it and her readiness to fight to the bitter end, even if it meant financial ruin for both of us. In response, I calmly instructed my lawyer not to proceed with the divorce. I said I didn't care anymore and that I wanted to give her the chance to rebuild her life after the 24 years of happiness we once shared together. I instructed my lawyer to tell her that I had no desire to continue the relationship and that I wished her a good life. I added a more colorful message to tell her to go to hell, and I asked my lawyer if he could deliver that message. My lawyer, recognizing our close connection, replied that he could do it with pleasure, but warned that there would be an additional $50 fee for this. Conversations with the children were more challenging. One by one, I had to convince them that there was no turning back on this decision. The first hurdle arose when Amelia told me, "Dad," Mom completely freaked out when I mentioned that I planned to live with you this summer. I promised Amelia that I would do my best to visit her and her grandparents. However, her reaction was so concerning that I found it necessary to step away from my phone. For a few days, Martha's behavior worsened when Ross decided to split his summer between both of us. As for Martha, I consciously refrained from inquiring about her, focusing on moving forward with my life. It wasn't easy, because remnants of my feelings for her still lingered. a mix of emotions tied to our shared past. Before the betrayal yet with my children's help, I gradually learned more about Martha's state of mind. To my surprise, it turned out she was going through a deep depression, mirroring the emotional shock I had once experienced. It's just unbelievable, especially considering what happened to her sister. The concept is quite simple. When you cheat, it hurts the very people you should love, which leads to the destruction of your marriage. Afterward, you continue to live your life. So how could Martha be depressed when I did everything possible to enable her to carry on? Without my presence, her reluctance to divorce seemed like an escape from reality, a way to avoid facing the fact that her actions caused our family to crumble. It's absurd, isn't it? For a few hours I was in denial myself, but she had been living in denial for the past 2 years. Even though she knew our children were in regular contact with me, she used our children as a way to express remorse for her actions. Through them, she tried to convince me that she was willing to do anything to prove her love for me. Although I understood that our children held hopes of reconciliation between us, I just couldn't bring myself to agree to talk to Marta. The geographic distance between us was also an issue for them, as they had to choose between their mother and me. Marta was relentless in her pursuit of my whereabouts. From our children, all she knew was that I lived in one of the southern states. It had been almost 3 years since I left her, and she finally managed to discover my location. One fateful day, leaving work, I spotted her lurking near the office. I couldn't fathom how she found out the city where I now resided, as I had tried to keep that information strictly confidential. Based on what my children shared with me, Martha was convinced that a face-to-face meeting would be enough to change my mind, but I was determined to change her mistaken perception. Swiftly and discreetly, I slipped out through a side door, my heart racing, and called Louise to let her know about the situation. Knowing my plan, I deliberately placed myself within Martha's sight, luring her to follow me. When I pulled into the parking lot, Martha caught up with me to confound her. I drove around the city for a while, stopped at the grocery store, and then returned home. Upon reaching the house, I parked, and Louise, a beautiful 30-year-old Latina, opened the door instead of my keys. A moment later, the doorbell rang, and Louise, cradling a 1-year-old baby in her arms, rushed to open it from my place in the kitchen. I observed Martha's astonishment upon seeing Louise. Louise greeted her with a distinct Spanish accent and asked how she could help. Martha expressed her desire to talk to me. At that moment, Louise called out to me from the doorway, and I took the baby in my arms. Louise told me to take care of our daughter while she finished preparing dinner. I turned to Martha and began, well, with a mix of surprise and irony in my voice. I met her gaze, acknowledging the situation. I inquired with a resolute yet attentive tone, asking Martha what she wanted. After almost 3 years apart, she responded in a barely audible whisper, confessing that she needed to apologize and convey how deeply sorry she was for the pain she caused me. She acknowledged that it wasn't my fault, but rather her own foolishness. Martha expressed her love for me then and now, describing me as the best husband and father a woman could hope for, while admitting her own thoughtlessness and genuine remorse for the suffering she had caused. I found her sincere apologies moving, but I knew it was essential to end this charade. Promptly I replied, well, it's all right. Fading happiness, as they say. All of this is in the past. I haven't dwelled on these memories for so long that I can genuinely say I forgive you. As I looked at Tamarita, who was radiating with joy while in my arms, I continued, in conclusion, I sincerely wish you a joyful life filled with love, much like mine, and my voice carried genuine sentiments. Martha's tears streamed down her face, and she mumbled something unintelligible. She hesitantly approached, embraced me, and hurriedly left the house. I closed the door behind her. Louise, noticing my fragile state, emerged from the kitchen feeling relieved and sad. She gently took Tamarita from my arms. Sensing my need for comfort, I leaned against the closed door, giving in to tears touched by the scene. Louise hugged me tightly and planted a gentle kiss on my forehead. With a determined look, she reached for the phone. She said, I need to let Horatio know that I'll be heading back home with our daughter soon, her voice exuding warmth and confidence. I whispered, thank you, Louise, sincerely, appreciative of her presence and unwavering support. I instructed Louise, make sure to tell Horatio I'll be waiting for you at the barbecue on Saturday, and her voice brimmed with enthusiasm. Absolutely, boss. I'll see you at the office tomorrow. The following week, my lawyer received the divorce papers, duly signed by Marta. As I moved forward, I realized that healing takes time, and I needed to find my own pace. I formed connections with several female friends, engaging in closeness relationship with only one, devoid of any serious commitments. It appeared that I was finally moving past the pain that had been inflicted on me. I grew less fearful of women, shedding my nervousness and humidity. Recognizing this personal growth, I began to think it might be time to grant Louise the freedom to introduce me to a kind and suitable woman, trusting her judgment. I contemplated the opportunity to meet someone who could bring genuine happiness back into my life. Now I'm reconsidering my decision. After this unexpected encounter, doubts have arisen, not about leaving Marta, as that decision remains steadfast, but about my prior assumption that we had nothing in common. I've always believed we had nothing to discuss, assuming she understood my stance on infidelity and how I'd react in such a situation. However, listening to fragments of Martha's story during our recent conversation, I'm beginning to question if I should have avoided this confrontation, despite my aversion to it. One thing, though, is undeniable: removing myself from her life was the best course of action. For me, it allowed me to find peace and recover, away from the toxic environment that engulfed us. I loved Marta so much that if I had encountered her at that moment, I might have succumbed to her remorse and accepted her apology. This could have led to more suffering, an eventual divorce. But now, 3 years since her betrayal and our separation, Marta's apology suddenly gave me a sense of closure. It released me from the pain I'd been carrying and offered a glimmer of hope for love once more. Over time, I might even contemplate revealing that I don't actually have a second daughter. Though I'm not certain I'll decide to do so, I no longer owe her anything, and the choice to disclose or keep it to myself is mine to make. I finally unburden myself of obligations to her, allowing me to move forward and embark on a new chapter in my life. But not for long. Yesterday, I stood by Marta's grave. With my children and numerous relatives, including Victoria, I wept bitterly like everyone else present. But I didn't see a single tear on Victoria's face. Martha, in a state of complete despair and inebriation, was involved in a fatal accident. Her life couldn't be saved. I contemplated for a long time. Victoria had encouraged her sister into a closeness relationship with her lover, and arrived at only one explanation. It was a form of revenge for Martha, in me revealing her betrayal, which had led to the end of her marriage with Mike. Perhaps now Victoria feels some sense of relief, as her sister lies in a casket. And I know one thing, I will never love any woman the way I loved Martha.